Peace.
Peace.
This is Joshua Law, Mr. PhD. You're just now entering the cipher called Real2reel360. K-Wise.
Peace, God.
Bring that beat in, kid.
Indeed.
Peace.
Yeah. What's going on, party people? Welcome to the Real2reel360 show. Let's get it in.
We do the knowledge and wisdom so you can understand. Real2reel360 shows in full command. We changing the game for how it all was taught. From bondage to freedom to an independent thought. Yo, the show is here to bring about a change for real. To lighten everyone so we all know the deal. 360 degrees is a fact. We created the show to give our love back to our communities so we can know what's going on and give them the support from knowledge to born. So if you're ready to learn, then it's time to go. Sit back and relax and enjoy your show. Peace.
Peace and blessings. What's good, everybody? Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you are, and all over the four centers and the four corners of this earth. Peace to Allah's 5% nation of gods and earth, and to all the human families of the planet Earth. I be DJ KYs, aka Kato, the Black Superhero. Welcome you to another episode of the Real2reel360. And believe me, we definitely got a powerhouse for you today. So without further or delay, I'm going to bring on my co-host, my brother in God, Mr. Joshua Allah, a.k.a. Mr. PhD himself. Peace, Almighty. What's good?
Peace to Allah's 5%. Peace to all the listeners, followers, everybody that's watching, everybody that's the sound of our ear. Today, we're going to have a great show. We have Dr. Faith Troupe on. Dr. Faith Troupe she works mostly with couples and trying to help individuals get through the difficult times. But today we will be discussing healing from domestic violence, sexual assault, and things of that nature. Sometimes we go through situations where we need to grieve and get through things. So today we will have Dr. Faith Troupe speaking on some of these things and ways that we can heal. So can we bring on Dr. Faith Troupe today? Okay.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey. Good afternoon, Dr. Troupe. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you brothers doing today?
We all good.
Man. It's been one of those days, I'll tell you that. I'll be honest.
I understand.
I'll be honest about it. But Doc, won't you just give our followers and our viewers a brief synopsis of who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I am the daughter of Florence Ann Troupe and Curtis Troupe. I am the granddaughter of Pearlie Mae Kendrick and Green Lester Kendrick, and the granddaughter of Lois Frazier. I come before you as a priest of ancestors. I'm also a priest of Orisha Shango specifically. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I work with individuals, couples, and families. Sometimes people are like, do you really work with individuals a lot? I do. Typically, I am a therapist who sees people not just as individuals. I see people within the context of which they live. So I look at community, I look at family, I look at societal influences on what's bringing them into therapy at the time. Mm-hmm. So I am all of that and then some. So for the sake of time, I won't get into much more than that.
Well, Doc, that's enough.
Right.
That's enough. We all understand there's ups and downs in relationships, and sometimes we need to have someone there to help us ease through those difficult times. Now, I wanted to speak to you today about domestic violence in relationships, mm-hmm. and how that domestic violence really alters the victim, the person that's applying the domestic violence, and also the children of the people that are involved in domestic violence. So how many times have you saw that, or you spoke with that when it came down to domestic violence in relationships?
Okay, so my experience as far as domestic violence as a therapist, right, is a few years here concentrated. So there were like 2 years where I did solely work with survivors of domestic violence, childhood sexual abuse, and then sexual abuse as an adult. So that would include like rape or any type of sexual assault that may have happened, right? So I have 2 years experience working with that population. As a marriage and family therapist, we're trained to work with couples, individuals who may come to us with a history of domestic violence. And so that might include the child, right, who is the witness, who may have bore witness to that. Sometimes, even when I'm doing couples work or individual work, it comes up at times that they may have witnessed or bore witness to domestic violence or conflict in the home. And a lot of times we reduce domestic violence to physical violence, but a lot of times it is the arguing, it is the pushing and shoving that we don't necessarily associate with bruises, right? But it still leaves an imprint on everyone, right? And not just the people in the household or the immediate survivors, right? It is a community issue. So even if you may not have been in the home, you might have been the neighbor, right, who heard the arguing, or you might have been the police officer who had to go out to the household, right, and have to provide that support in the moment, right? So it's not just families who are being impacted, couples who are being impacted, but whole families, extended family, communities are being impacted by domestic violence. And a lot of times it is helpful to look at it from a traumatic or trauma-informed lens, because then we're allowed to see it as more than just this one person dealt with this specific thing, but more so, okay, so in 5 years, how is this person going to be impacted by it? Not just the survivor, not just the perpetrator, but also the children and those who have bore witness. So I don't, and I've never worked with perpetrators before. It is not in my wheelhouse to do so. I know that about myself. I am not capable of it, nor do I desire to work with people who are violent and are capable of abusing others, but I have provided a lot of support throughout my work.
Okay. Now we understand that there's levels to domestic violence, and there's also red flags that come up when it, like with sexual assault, when an individual always leave like an imprint that they're going in that direction. Can you speak to some of those red flags that might come up that an individual might see that could lead to either domestic violence or sexual assault?
Right. So I do want to make the distinction between domestic violence and sexual assault, because a lot of times we will see the two if there's intimate partner violence. So there are some words that are used interchangeably, like partner violence, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, sexual assault. So sexual assault is typically where we relegate it to the actual act of sexual abuse, right? But when we look at domestic violence, we're looking at not just physical abuse or sexual abuse. We're actually looking towards a buildup of behavior. So what we may see as red flags, sometimes they are very small, so they seem like yellow warnings, yellow flags or orange flags, if you will, not quite at the level of red. And so it might include economic abuse, right? So when you get into a relationship and you see that your money is being controlled by your partner, like they don't want you to spend, or they want all the money to go into one account, but they also want to relegate how that money gets spent, or you end up getting what's considered an allowance. Right? So that control, and it's domestic violence itself is a system or a process of power and control. So that's what also makes it very different from like sexual assault, because in domestic violence, you see the buildup of power and control in the relationship. So you see the economic abuse, you see the what we call psychological or emotional abuse, which again, when we're talking about red flags, it could be that they have a different face in front of people versus when you're private, right? And so that public face may be that they don't let you talk, right? Or they don't let you speak. But the private face may be that you feel like we can talk and exchange ideas and it ain't no issue, right? So most people be like, oh, that ain't that deep, because when we're alone, you're different than when we are out in public or when we're around your peers. And so sometimes those don't seem so much like red flags. They're like, oh, that's different. That's interesting, right? But it's not at the degree at which, right, that you would see a person just haul off and slap you in front of a room full of people.
Right.
So
like, go ahead.
Excuse me. Would you say that domestic violence has many splinter cells under the law?
Oh God, yes. And it's not and it's a cycle, right? So it's a cycle of, the tension's warming up, and then you see it, and then we go into like a honeymoon phase. And those cycles, you go through the cycle at various different waves. So you can be in the honeymoon stage and then he just hauls off and hits you, or she hauls off and hits you, right? But it is just enough to where you stay, so where it doesn't seem so much like a red flag, or they use the slight manipulation to say, I just didn't mean to do that, right? Or I just got really upset, or I was really frustrated, or I'm really worried about our finances, or I'm worried about this person looking at you. So I don't really want you to dress like that when we go out. Like, it's one, when you in the house, it's okay for you to dress a certain way, but when we go outside, I don't really like people looking at you like that, or I don't want to have people talking to you in a certain way. Right. And so in some ways it looks very yellow flag-ish, if you will, not so much as a run red flag. But the physical abuse and the sexual abuse that we see is usually, sometimes it could be years later. Like 7. I mean, I've literally worked with people where it's 7 years before they actually had the abuse, where it was like this person sexually assaulted me, physically assaulted me, all in the same night. So it's not usually like you meet a person and they become abusive immediately. There is I'm going to use a word that we use with childhood sexual abuse, which is grooming. It's a build up to it, so that when you do get slapped that first time, you probably so emotionally and psychologically like reduced or already altered, if you will, that when the person does hit you, it kind of shocks you, but it's also like, oh, whew. And then that honeymooning phase start all over again. So it's not easily understood. It is not easily explained. And most people will take the position of, I would never find myself in that situation.
Now, the question that I have is, there's a lot of individuals, like we just saw, there's a comment about individual being related to someone that's in domestic violence and don't want to get out. Right. What is the thing that holds individuals in relationships like that?
Brother, I wish I could say it's one thing, but it's not, right? So that's why I don't mind talking about domestic violence. But I also know that it's a very complex conversation to get into. I wish I could say it was because they love the person, right? Mm-hmm. By the time the physical abuse or what the outside person sees as an issue, there's a buildup of that thing. And so over time, they've convinced you that I love you. This is love. And not only that, they don't know how to get out safely. Right. And so it is very challenging to leave. There was at one point, I don't know what the statistic is right now, but I believe the average time a person will leave a domestic violence situation was about 7. I don't know what it is currently.
I know that we always speak to it like family members who have family members that are in domestic violence situations. We always say that there's family members you can go to help you get out,
Right.
And they still stay. And and like my cousin stated right there, that she has a fear of being alone. How do being going through a situation like that and being alone go hand in hand?
So loneliness is like a really bad drug at times, because it's the thing that keeps us in a lot of situations that are unhealthy. Like we will convince ourselves that it is better to be with someone than to stay there to leave. Perfect example that a lot of families deal with who are like generations of domestic violence, right?
Right.
You sit back and you're like, well, how did grandma stay? Right? Why would she have stayed? And a lot of times it is a mixture of things. You're hoping things will get better, right? Or you got children that this person's probably taking care of financially, or you don't want to be alone. You don't think you can do better. And the good one, which is always that it's better to be with the thing than to go out and try to find something new, right? So it is so complex because it's so deeply ingrained. By the time people become aware of what the situation is, it has become deeply ingrained in that person. And so it takes a lot more than just a family member who is willing to support them.
You say it's like a branding thing in the mind state.
Almost, but that's where it starts, right? Absolutely. It is not. It's the name calling. It's the, oh, you don't look good in that. You should put something else on. Or, I'm the best thing you ever had. Like, I know about your other relationships. Like, I am the it. And it is that mental part that is very much important in the process and then the cycle of domestic violence.
That's one of the things we always add on about, because see, what a lot of people fail to realize, words have power.
Right.
Words have significant power to each and every one it may come across. Right. So how you receive the information, and then how the information is being put out to you and illustrated, right, can do a lot of good and or damage depending upon the situations, and right. With the domestic violence, like I said, there's so many avenues of this approach that a lot of people do sometimes get confused between, as you talked about earlier, try to distinguish between the sexual abuse, the verbal abuse, mental abuse under there, but they all really fall under that big umbrella of domestic violence, depending upon, like I said, the situation, because you have marriages that's domestic, you have relationships that are domestic, you have partnerships that are domestic, all right. kinds now, right. So everything that you're speaking on and looking at the comments that's coming across, you're hitting them right on the head, Doc. So all this is valuable information for every Black man, woman, and child, and everybody in America to adhere to. Strong words to, like Josh Mel was talking about, when you're in a situation with the traditional sense and it's hard, how do you dealing with someone that's so emotionally tied mentally into the traditional way, like, oh, I can't leave him, he won't make it
right.
without
me. Right.
But you're the victim.
Yeah, so even as a therapist, I don't try to convince people to leave. Right. My goal is to help you see what happened and what got you here, right? And so there are subtle ways at which I'm able to help you see, oh, like you never had control over your finances, or you couldn't leave a house after a certain time. And it sounds, when you're talking to an adult, like, right, you're not talking to a child about a parent. When you have to say that out loud, like, oh, I worked a full-time job, but I never was able to spend a dime. Or I could only wear certain clothes, or they would only allow me to talk to certain people. One of the most powerful things that happens in domestic violence relationships, or relationships that include domestic violence, is isolation. And that starts early. So it is the talking about your friends, and well, they're not really there for you. They're not really down for you like that. And it is harmful, because by the time the person is like, uh-oh, I'm seeing the red flags, right? You so socially isolated that a lot of times you haven't spoken to your best friend, your parents, your homegirl about anything meaningful in months. So the conversations become real light. You start to distance yourself, not because you want to, but because at the end of the day, this person has created such a isolation, a bubble, if you will, around you, that people won't even notice how you've changed, other than you've isolated yourself.
Okay, Doc. We're speaking about the domestic violence, the physical part of
Right.
domestic abuse. But with the emotional abuse is the real chain that binds the person in. Yeah, because we can see the damage that the physical domestic part does, but
Right.
it's the emotional abuse that lingers in a person, that holds a person, the dominating and manipulating of the mind. So how what are the red flags for that? Like how
So
do
I
you
would go ahead. I'm sorry.
how can you see that coming?
So that's the thing that I want to take even a step further back. I would say it's more of a spiritual abuse, right? It is the killing of the person's spirit, that godly essence that lives within all of us, that gets destroyed over time, right? So it looks like you not trusting your own voice. You're not trusting your own power, but within the relationship. You don't even you're not encouraged to and do the things that you enjoy that bring you light, right? And so it is that emotional / spiritual piece, and I would say the spiritual component of this is what is most detrimental, because by the time we see it, the people who are like, oh man, let me help you, let me extend this hand to you, it is that part that says it is a part of the process of domestic violence that speaks to, you don't trust yourself to be able to be okay, right? Once a person is capable of convincing you that you would not be okay without them, you're done. They got you. Right. And so that we see that dynamic on social dynamics, right, with racism, social racism, the dynamics of like people being incapable of seeing themselves living truly free, right? But that's what happens ultimately in relationships where there's domestic violence. It is that slow deteriorating of the self, of the soul of the person, that is like you can't even see yourself getting up out this situation. You're so to me, it's like you're a walking soulless person, which is right, which people don't see it until you get outside your household, or you get outside the context of that person, and you're like, oh, I used to laugh. You don't even laugh no more because they done convinced you your smile was ugly. Right? Or it's the little things. So it's not even like they look at you and they're like, because if somebody came to you and said, you're not really that attractive, you'd be like, all right, kick rocks. I'm not the person for you. So they're not going to come out and say that from the beginning, but it will be a slow deteriorating of you, to where you not only don't see the life, the light within yourself, but you don't even see that you're capable of giving it. So you can't even do nothing right. And there can be something small like the laundry or dinner having to be at a certain time. So that power and control piece is very pervasive, right? but it's in multiple areas. And the physical and the sexual piece, I would say, is the latter part of the cycle of domestic violence.
Mm.
I hope I hit your question. I'm
You
sorry.
did. You
I
did. You did.
apologize.
I was looking at some of the comments, and I
Okay.
wanted to speak towards some of the comments. And domestic violence is always like a sore spot for me personally, because I've witnessed it growing up. But when you talk about the actual resemblance and what it leaves on a person, and how a person has to really struggle to overcome the different channels of domestic violence, when you're talking emotional, financial, physical, and build themselves back up. How can they heal from being in that type of situation moving forward? Because I see a lot of strong Black women go through it, and I watch how their children, you know what I'm saying, is affected by it, and watching the mother and the parent go through it. So what are some of the things that, because we always say women, because a lot of times men don't even,
Right.
you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Even
Right.
though men go through, they might not go through the physical, but they go
Right.
through the emotional and the
Most
financial as
definitely.
well. So
Most
how
definitely.
is it that individuals are able to climb up, pull themselves up, and start the healing process from domestic violence?
Mhm. So I'm a therapist, so I'm gonna say therapy.
Okay.
But I think the bigger picture is that we have to be open to having these conversations so that it is not this thing that is happening behind closed doors.
Mhm.
Like, we have to do a better, like, to me, the work of us, all of us being responsible for healing, is through the work of grief. This grief work that Sabonfu Somé talks about, that is our right for our own healing, that we create safe spaces where people can come and have this type of exchange and know that it'll be judgment free.
Mhm.
Right? To know that you don't have to have this conversation, and you don't have to go cry in your closet. You can come out in your front yard, and you can wail and you can cry and say it ain't right, and have people come up and say, you know what, we got you. And so it is a slow process. A lot of times, like I said, survivors of domestic violence will return to the situation, will return to the home or the relationship. So a part of that is realizing that, one, that's okay, because that's going to happen. Two, being able to create some level of independence from that person,
Mhm.
which is difficult when you're looking at financially, can a person survive on their own? Emotionally, spiritually, can a person survive? Do they feel capable enough to raise children on their own, take care of themselves, let alone raise children?
Right.
And then that safety piece, like, we definitely have to create safer spaces, because although there are instances where people will say, if you are in a bad situation, I will help you, there are also situations where a person will say, I'm not going to help you.
Right.
Right. And so that happens as well. Or they don't believe the person, which is another unfortunate dynamic. Like, I know this person, they ain't the type that's gonna do this or that or that. And it's like, how you came to that conclusion? Why? Because they look good on the outside. They're not gonna wear the badge that says I'm an abuser.
Mhm. Now, there was a comment about how my cousin, I will say
Mhm.
that, was speaking about how she had become susceptible to emotional abuse, because she went through a period of time when she wasn't working, and
Mhm.
she having to rely on someone else financially,
Right.
and that opened the door for, certain things to go on. Now, once an individual has the trust issues, like Akila Rafan is saying, is it hard to pull yourself out of that? And once you get your job and you start rebuilding your self-esteem, do that person still have that type of a hold over you?
So no, they don't have that type of a hold on you. However, I will say this, it is possible, right? Because again, people are likely to return to the situation. But the one thing I will say about what you're describing is typically abusers look for the vulnerabilities, right? So they're looking for you to be down on your luck. They're looking for you to be shortly out of a bad relationship. They're looking for you to be a single parent, right? Or they're looking for you to have low self-esteem, right? And so a part of the process isn't that you are at your best when they come across you. It is sometimes that they are seeking you out because you are a vulnerable person at that point. And there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable, because we all have moments in our lives where, you know, you ain't got the job, or you're not making the money that you thought you'd be making, or you in college, right? So there are all sorts of dynamics that people will prey on that are our vulnerabilities. And so a part of being able to heal from that is acknowledging that I'm not my vulnerabilities. I'm not broke. I'm not broken because I didn't have a job, right? So it is, the healing work is about being able to look back and say, oh, this person took advantage of me.
Right.
Like there's nothing that any human being can say or do that would justify someone being abusive towards them.
You know, with that is, we always have that one relative that will risk it all for you, you know. And we know that we don't want to see that person get incarcerated because of certain situations. Is that the reason why, like, certain family members don't say anything?
Oh God, yeah. Or they're the person who's financing their lifestyle. Like I once worked with a family where this person had been so abusive, but not only did they financially take care of their household, but their parents' household and a few aunts and uncles. So when you think about that, who gonna say, "Oh, you wrong"? That's out of line. That your behavior is inappropriate.
Right.
Right. And then you got to consider that isolation piece of it. It's like, not only now are you isolated, but you surrounded by all these people that this person is fronting financially. Who's gonna want to give that up on the front just because one person is saying I'm in this abusive situation? Keep in mind though, I put my money on it. You ain't the first one.
Would you say that the form of domestic violence is constructed around, before it became domestic violence, it's the strongest word that's been out here for centuries, which is bullying?
Right. So bullying, no, I wish it was. I think bullying is a part of the emotional psychological abuse, right? It is a part of what happens in domestic violence. It is that putting you down to the point that you don't feel like you can pick yourself up. Definitely, right? But I don't want to negate the historical physical factor of it, that is about, especially in the Black community, that is about physically or using physical abuse and being physical with people in order to control them, right? And so that comes from our history, not of us, but to us. And so we have to be very mindful of, which is why I know the healing is not that people go into therapy. Like, we got to heal as a community. We have to be willing to say, this is not acceptable at a community level, in our neighborhoods, in our families. Like, we have to be able to say that, because we're not just fighting the current dynamics of domestic violence. We're fighting centuries upon centuries of, especially the dynamics between men and women and amongst us as Africans. This is what has been used to keep us here. Right. And so that's why I speak to not just that physical piece, not just, it's a spiritual component to this. That is that slow killing of us on a spiritual level. So we get caught up with the things of domestic violence, but we don't see that there's other things that we need to be fighting. Right. And so it's multi-level, especially for us. And so I don't want to not speak to that. I don't want to ignore that piece of it because it is very important.
All right, Dr. Harris, we're going to get to that sexual assault part in a second because I see that she brought that question back. So let's address that for Dr. Harris because I think that we have strayed away from that question a little bit. Can you speak about the sexual assault and intimate partner relationships? What does it look like? How do you address it?
So ultimately, sexual assault and domestic violence situation or intimate partner violence, it is why the word consent became a part of our conversation, because sexual violence is any sort of non-consensual sexual contact, right? So it could be anything. It could be from the point of forcing someone to give you oral sex or watching someone forcing yourself onto someone else. And that happens amongst both men and women. All right. So, we have to put aside all the judgment of what we think go on and what men and women can't do. But sexual violence and intimate partner violence is detrimental because a lot of times people will come into therapy who've been sexually assaulted and say, they thought I was enjoying it because my body responded on a physiological level, right? But physiology is different from you being in a trauma space, in a space of trauma. So, whether you are married to this person or whether it's the person you are going out with and y'all have been in a relationship for 2 years or you just met, right? In a sense of sexual assault, our bodies respond naturally to things. But when we are in a trauma space, in a space of a traumatic incident, we do a few things. And most of the time, it is that I am trying to survive. So some of us can fight. Some of us can, totally freeze. And some of us, it's like, look, we're going to get through this the best way we can. Right. And so that is our normal responses to trauma, but the ultimate goal is to survive. And so sexual assault and sexual trauma and domestic violence, it's not all, sometimes it's the control of sex, right? It is the control of when we have sex. It is, and it's, again, when we talk about the variedness, how it varies, it could be as initially like, oh, I'm only going to have sex with you if you act right. Okay, well, how does that enter into the conversation? Right. And then by the end, it's only when I want it, and it's only when I take it by force. Right. And so there's a buildup to it, but most people don't start out being assaulting in their sexual acts. Most people don't, unless they're into the kink community, which is a whole nother conversation. But that's not the same because the consent piece is what is most important. Like, I'm consenting to this. I'm consenting to you holding me. It's like when a person grabs you forcefully and you're like, uh-oh, do I like that or do I not like that? Did I give you consent to pull on me like that? And that's important. So that's why we have to get into the habit of consent. That is how when we are talking to our brothers, our sisters, our children, we need to be talking about consent. Do I have the permission to go forward? It doesn't seem, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem comfortable or natural, but we need to make it comfortable and natural. We need to make it okay to ask for permission.
Doc, is it fair to say that a lot of people who are in marriages or intimate relationships feel that they have the right to someone else's body at any given time.
No, that's not fair to say.
That's not fair. No, I'm just saying because that's
Yeah,
part of
it's not
sexual abuse.
right. I mean, I think one, it depends on what your vows are when you enter into marriage. Like if part of your vows is that your body is mine, okay, then you're going into that, consenting into that, right?
Right.
But even at the point of saying I'm consenting to us going into this sexual relationship where you and I can have sex at any moment, you still need. If I say no, then no should be sufficient, right? And so I don't think it is safe to assume, although there is a lot of intimate partner violence that happens within marriages, right? There's a lot of sexual assault that happens within marriages, and a lot of people will say, well, that's not sexual assault because they're married.
Right.
But what if she said no?
And that's where I was leading to, because it says that the bedroom should be undefiled. So being the fact that we're looking at it from that point of view, is it's still not okay to take advantage of your partner.
Never.
And these are some of the things that I know females go through, some guys go through.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, right. Everybody goes through because they feel like if they don't, they're letting their spouse down.
Right. Which I think that is why it is helpful to have healthy conversations around sex amongst your partner. I don't care if you're married or not.
Right.
We have to be able to have conversations around what feels good, what does not feel good, what works for you in the sense of what feels okay. Like if you say no, is it playful no? Do you want me to keep going? Like those types of conversations are necessary. One, because it helps have a healthy sexual relationship.
Right.
Right. And so it is important to engage in conversations that help make those things very clear. So we are in those questions, those conversations evolve over time. So stuff that you might have been cool with when we first got together, 10 years down the line, you're like, not so much. And so the conversation, we need to be open to constantly having the conversation around what is working for us sexually, because that's just a part of our sexual health in the relationship. And those conversations are easy conversations. Not easy conversations. Those are healthy conversations. I just don't believe that they're easy because we get into this space of, oh, we married, it's whatever. And it's like, well, not so much. Not so much. Because our bodies change. So our needs change. And so we need to be open to communicating about that.
Right, right.
Could I ask this, interject? Would you say that a lot of our influences come from other entities, such like television, movies, programs, plays, maybe to that nature? Because I remember, I could say like this here, a lot of things that I saw watching Good Times as a child, I could actually put my family in that situation, because I never grew up in a household like the Huxtables.
Right.
My house, my dad was James Jr., James Evans, period. It was his way or no way.
Right.
But when you see the Huxtable come along and it's more of a relaxed setting and family getting together talking, sometimes that can become a culture shock within someone.
Right.
Because it's like, wow, I didn't think that we could ever have that. Seems abnormal.
Right.
On side of tracks versus that. So,
right.
A lot of things, I think that we do have a lot of strong influences out there that has caused a lot of negativity in our lives and factors,
right.
to where we would shut down, where we don't talk at a time where we would need to have. Because I remember as a child, if there were things going on, the only time we could discuss family issues is if we were sitting down at the table together, and the adults would say, okay, what's going on with you? Now, at that point in time, as a child, you had a right to say what you said, but you still had to remember you was a child. And
you had to be respectful.
So a lot of that, I feel, still plays some type of traditional state today. Would you say?
I do. I think the unfortunate part is that we haven't realized that those are lies, right? The lie of we don't talk, the lie of it's not cool to ask for permission, or the lie that no, we can't, you're not supposed to cry. Like, you're not supposed to let people see you sweat. You're not supposed to, like, those are the lies that we have been told. And instead of us healing in a healthy way, coming together and having genuine conversations, we walking around holding it all in. Right. And then we see the Huxtables and it's like, well, that don't make sense. But we see this chaos and it's like, well, this is what they're saying. This is what we should be doing. And it's like, but no, we can talk. We can have healthy conversation. Men and women can come into the same room and actually have a healthy conversation. Black men don't have to hate Black women. Black women don't have to hate Black men. But if we look at what's being told to us in massive proportions, we're not supposed to be able to sit down and have conversations. We're not supposed to talk to our children. We're not supposed to be able to sit in a room together and heal. Right? Because at the core of it, we're not supposed to love each other. Right. And so when it comes to the things that you speak of that are outside of us, right, that are the things that are being poured into our communities about what we should be and how we should, it's like at the end of the week you should be drinking, at the end of a long day you should be drinking, or you should be able to treat your wife and talk to your spouse any kind of way and have them suck it up, or you should send your children off and not allow them to talk and they don't have a voice. Like, but who said that? Who's the one telling us that? Because that's not from a I am coming into this earth. I'm already needing someone. I'm needing my mother, and I'm needing my father, and I'm needing community so that I'm healthy. So how is it that then all of these things that are anti-community, anti-family, supposed to be about our well-being? But that is exactly how domestic violence exists, because you are so isolated from yourself and from your community and the people who love you that you are now in such an unhealthy dynamic that you can't see yourself out of. So yeah, the external influences are detrimental to us.
Now, we realize that a lot of times that individuals are wearing a generational curse when it comes down to domestic violence. How do you break that cycle?
Well, one, you got to realize it's a cycle. It's a part of your lived experience. It is so healthy for us to be able to say, I grew up in a household that was unhealthy. I grew up in a household where clearly things happened that shouldn't have. Because just by uttering that, you are already knowing that you got to do something different. By uttering that, it was not right, it was not healthy, it was detrimental to me developing. At that point, I got work to do. And so our lives are devoted to managing and dealing with that. It is not I tell people often, especially who have survived trauma like domestic violence, sometimes people end up back in therapy or something happens and it's like, I thought I had dealt with that. I thought I wasn't like this, but I see it showing up in this different way. I want us to see it like an onion. Right? So there's layers to this, right? And until you die, you should be forever growing. So you never want to be like, oh, I took that coat off and hung it somewhere and I don't have to deal with it no more. No, you want to introduce it into the table, bring it to the table as much as you need to. Grieve that thing as much as you cry for your own self, cry for the child who witnessed it. Don't hold it in, because it is that when it sneaks up on you, it takes you out. And then you like, I don't want to be in relationships no more because I'm so, I got too much to deal with. That's how people end up in these very toxic, unhealthy relationships that feel very cyclical. Because instead of saying, oh, I got work to do, it's like, oh, well, let me just continue. No, let us speak to it. Get help. Tell somebody that you're struggling with it instead of holding it in, because that's not where the healing occurs. It is the air, bringing air to it, bringing light to it, and saying, I got to work on this, and genuinely working on it.
Right. And that's the problem that we have, whereas individuals don't recognize that they're in a vicious cycle.
Right.
or that they even are an abuser. See, a lot of people who are looking for control or seeking out control don't realize that they're doing it and they're abusing their spouse.
So I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to take that one because I think to a certain degree, people who enjoy power and control know that they enjoy it.
Right.
Right, because they ain't willing to let it go. Right. So you know that you like power and control, and you like dominating over somebody, and you like having someone submit to you
Right.
because you know that about yourself. Now,
Right.
whether or not you're willing to acknowledge that that thing is a problem, that's a whole nother dynamic. But yeah, people recognize the things that they do. Now, whether or not they're willing to do something about it is something totally different.
Hmm.
Which is why in community, you cannot sit back and be like, oh, look at you. You straight foolishness in your household, but you look good outside. No, dude, like check yourself. Sis, you out here looking wild out in these streets.
Right.
We have to be willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you're talking about domestic violence and you're talking about adding family members involved, how the victim a lot of times protect the victimizer, because that person can get hands and feet put on them, and quickly, and they will do all within their power to save or keep them from getting hurt. And even going back to the isolation period, where will isolate themselves away from individuals who are willing to do that.
Right.
Is that part of the dysfunction that comes along with domestic violence, or because I've seen that a couple of times?
Yeah, no, you'll see the person, be it male or female, woman or man, they will protect the person who's creating the chaos or the toxicity within the relationship.
Right.
The best that we can do is be there for them when they seek support. Right. But then you put conditions on the support. So it's like, it's like the no offense to those of us who use drugs like crack, but if you see the crackhead out in the street, you're making a conscious decision whether or not you're gonna get them $1 because you're not really sure about whether or not what they're gonna do with that dollar. We have to be responsible for what we do. So if someone comes to us and say that they are in an abusive situation, then it is up to us to say, hey, I see that this is happening. So I am willing to do this so long as you put certain things in place. The certain things in place usually means a safety plan. Right? So putting in things that allow you to have a financial, putting money away, packing a bag, having a way that you can leave the situation when you need to. Right? So it is like, I'm willing to help you. I'm willing to give you a couch to sleep on. If you go back, I need you to start saving some money. I need you to start like packing some clothes. I need you to start looking for a place to stay. Because those are the things that will help the person really become independent.
Indeed. I wanted to address a statement I just made. Of course, I know you hear me, and trust me, I you know what it is, because as a child, my mother packed us up and we moved to Chicago. We moved to the west side of Chicago, Jackson, California, because of that type of situation. And as a child, we dealt with it, and we end up moving back. So knowing this, knowing how that would put me in certain situations mentally, like even with relationships, I wouldn't know how to deal with relationships. I would know how to deal with individuals outside far as enjoying brotherhood or you know what I mean, accepting friendships, because if it seemed disrespectful, I became that type of violent person. If you hurt someone I love, I became that violent person. So, like I said, I know you hear me, and I'm glad you're good. And I wasn't addressing you, but I'm glad that you're good. And I know that if the situation was to come awry, you would call me, and we would leave it just as that. And domestic violence have distorted, have made a tornado storm through my family. And learning how to address it as a whole is something that this show is, I'm hoping, can help me, help some of my relatives that are watching to heal, to get over that grieving process. And it's that's where we're looking to find out how can we heal as a family, as a people, when it comes down to domestic violence. Because it wasn't just like financial, because that was one part of the controlling issue. It was emotional. When you engulf yourself into all three, four different factions, and your children are watching you, you know what I mean? How do the child heal from that? How do the child heal and learn how to deal with the opposite sex, and have a successful relationship with the person of the opposite sex? How do they heal and become a good friend to someone, or understand how friendship, you know what I'm saying, can come about?
Right. So it all begins with the self. Like, you got to be good to yourself in order for you to be good in a relationship or good to someone else, which is a difficult thing to do at times. It is difficult to be gentle with ourselves. Like, man, I get angry quick, right? Or it don't take much for me to be ready to bust somebody upside their head. It is very important for us to say, but I don't like that part of myself, and do something about it. So it's not that you're looking outward to fix this thing. You're looking within you. Like, I realized that I witnessed some things that were traumatic to my spirit, that forever altered my development. It's like, when we think about trauma and healing from trauma, a huge part of that is realizing, at what point did you had to stop being a child? Right? Once you can identify the point at which you stopped being a child and you started being somebody who was witnessing abuse, or you were trying to figure out how to save this person from it, that's where your healing begins. That's where the process starts, of knowing that from the beginning you shouldn't have been in that position, and there's nothing wrong with you. The situation that is wrong is what's wrong. The situation, the dynamic, but not you. And so the healing is in getting yourself back to connected to the light that exists within us.
That's that was something like I know personally that I had to do, and it took almost 50 years to get to that point.
No, it's life work. It ain't immediate work. It ain't the moment work. It's life work.
And it's funny, my cousin, my peaceful is this, and we always laugh about how I never paid any attention. All the dysfunction, all of everything that was going on, I never paid any. I would skip right past it. Like, literally, as a little kid, I can see things going on, because if it didn't affect me directly, it didn't affect me at all.
Right.
And I would stop. If it affected me, I would stop and I would address it in a situation where it was physical. Everything was on the physical.
Right.
Because I didn't know how to adjust mentally.
Who does that when we're children, though?
Right.
That's the unfortunate part about being a child and witnessing abuse, is because you don't have control over your own dynamics. So not only do you not have control, but while you're trying to figure out who you are and who you are becoming, you get this thing that forever imprints on your development.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's so like domestic violence between the relationship, the two people, is one thing, but
Mm-hmm.
everybody else forever altered. But the children who are supposed to be trusting in these two people to take care of them have created a false sense of security. So who you are, the development, the foundation in which you stand on, is shaky at best, because the love, the support of you, the trusting in people, all that's supposed to happen in your household don't, because you see straight chaos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it is difficult to establish relationships later in life, but it's difficult to establish that relationship with yourself, because the things that were there that were supposed to say, you good, like, you come up with some good ideas, you should trust yourself more, you should challenge yourself, that thing you think you want to do, go ahead and do it. All that gets stopped. Why? Because you watching your parents, or you watching these two people who's supposed to love each other not really figure this thing out too well.
Can I wow. Y'all gotta pardon me because this is the exact thing that I went through. And that's why I'm like kind of caught up in it. But I gotta address it because as a child growing up in my household, my moms and pops were everything to us, to me. And I only speak for myself. I can't speak for my brothers and sisters. I have to just say this. But at a time where things were going left for them, cause split amongst the household. Now, me seeing that my moms and pops were everything was like, okay, now to find out that there's broken glass, it's like, as me, it's like, whose side are you supposed to belong to when you got two people that's been teaching you to love yourself and love each other for everything it is, but now the house is divided. So now my mindset is like, I don't know which way to turn. I don't know. I couldn't talk to nobody when I wanted to for the things that I would see when I got older. And then I noticed that my anger, again, I would get angry. I was always an angry child in the first place, but now the rage was even more. And so I would lash out for the wrong things to get somewhat of that attention, to try to see if what I do would make a difference amongst them.
Right.
But the only thing I realized later on in life that it was hurting me more because my father got murdered later. So I was never able to address him for what I was feeling for, but to say, hey, this is how you made me feel.
Right.
This is how I feel. So my thing is this. What is the most important thing we can do to our children in the persistence of a domestic violence? Because that's going to be the determining factor for our future ahead. Because if I go back in time and tell my younger self what I know now to avoid what you went through, it would be amazing. So I'm gonna have to excuse myself for a minute, y'all. So I'll be
By all means, get yourself together.
No, we have to take care of self first. Children are resilient. We who all, myself included, who grew up in not so good situations, children are resilient, but they are still our responsibility. Right. And so I think about the number of women who gave me peace, even if it was for a small amount of time. I'm very grateful for those moments. So if you see children who you think are not in a safe situation, sometimes just asking them, hey, how you doing? Right? Or creating the space where they feel safe. And safe, not just like a physical safety, like ain't no harm gonna come to you in my home, right? So if you have someone's child in your home and you are concerned about their household situation, their household dynamics, first and foremost, creating a physical safety is important. Creating an emotionally safe space where the child knows that they could say anything to you and it's okay. Right? So that those types of things help. Also being able to listen without judgment. right? So a lot of times children do not know how to filter what they're experiencing. So it all gets dumped into this vat, right? And over time, it ends up looking like anger for little boys, especially our Black boys, right? Um, and sometimes it looks like depression. Sometimes it looks like isolation. Sometimes it looks like promiscuity, young, right? It looks like getting attention in all the wrong ways. And so a lot of times we will shun those children or we will speak ill of those children. Well, they just so bad. She's so fast. She all she do is wear that black. Um, we need to be creating spaces where it is safe for our children to come and talk to any adult. So as adults, we have to slow down and be attentive to them because they are our future. So even if I don't have children, my friends' children should know that my home is always a safe space for them. Right. So that it's not this divide of you have to remove them from that situation and create, it is about creating the safe spaces no matter where these children find themselves. So we are all responsible, right? For being able to create safe space. So you want to be able to create physical safety, meaning that when they are with you, they know they are physically safe, but also that emotional, spiritual safety that says, I can be myself and not feel judged, or I can say things about my parents that I might be seeing in my house, and I don't have to worry about you talking about them or talking about me because that's the household that I'm growing up in, which sometimes, community does that.
When you're in a community that embraces you or embraces the family that's going through domestic violence, how do that look? What do that actually look like?
What do you mean when the community embraces the family?
Right, when the community, because see, a lot of times the community don't know
what to do,
actually going on inside of a household, or if they do, they don't know how to address it. So can you speak towards how that would look if the community itself would wrap their arms around this family and try to help them?
To me, it's exactly that, right? It is the wrapping of the arms, but it's the same that we would do for our children. It is about creating a safe space. So regardless of who's being abused and who's doing the abusing, we want to create a safe enough space so that both people can get support. And I've been around, I come from communities where the brothers don't mind laying hands on another brother if they found out that they were abusive. So at times that I know that happens. What I'm encouraging though is that the conversations are had, that it is very clear that this will not be accepted, and you will have to leave this community if it doesn't stop. Right.
So,
and go ahead.
No, go ahead. By all means, go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
That becomes part of it, right? The understanding that under no circumstances is it okay and is it healthy to put your hands on anybody, right? If you feel like you need to talk something out by laying hands, then you need to go and do it in a way and in a space where we gonna sit down and talk about it. And if you don't feel like we can talk about it, then the person who can match you in strength is the person you need to be laying hands on, but not somebody who's in a vulnerable space, which is usually people who are smaller or children, right? And unfortunately, that is the thing that ends up happening in homes that have domestic violence. The person don't have no hold back on anybody who's vulnerable, which a lot of times that includes them being abusive to children.
Now, the question that I have with this is, when you're dealing with someone who has been in a violent relationship, right? Going forward, how much of that do they look for in a next relationship? Because a lot of times people speak about how females, they try to push your buttons to see if you will hit them, or they feel like, being hit is a part of, he loves me or all that. BS crap or what have you. But how much is that real for a lot of
It's
people?
very real. It's very real. It is very real because sometimes, especially if we grew up in households, right, where there was violence, sometimes that is the only way you got attention. Right. So it's like if you're not hitting me, then you must not see me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And not that that's healthy by any stretch of the imagination, but in a lot of ways, that is what we receive as true.
Mm-hmm.
Like the only time a person, you know, and this is how we get into relationships and think people are just there to take advantage of us, because what happens is that it feels like the only way I'm here is because you want something from me, or you're trying to hurt me. You're going to hurt me eventually. I'm just waiting for the day where you just haul off and hit me. So I'm gonna do all the things that I need to do so that you can go ahead and hit me, and then we can part ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of that over time will result in somebody who has a very hard time getting out of that cycle of abuse within relationships. It's just it's really like it's really hard. And so it does require, I mean, I'm a therapist, so I'm always say it requires therapy, but in a community setting, it requires that people, I I've grown to appreciate barbershops
Mm-hmm.
for this reason as a woman. Um, I used to cut my hair really, really short. And so a part of being in a barbershop, you get to hear the conversations that men have.
Mm-hmm.
And it is healthy because those are the types of conversations that will either get you checked or you will get support.
Mm-hmm.
So like you come in and you say something absolutely crazy, and somebody will be like, "Oh man, you sounding real crazy right now. What you mean you had to haul off and hit her? Like who does, if you're in the right group of people, right? If
Right.
you're amongst the right group of people.
Now
But
that's a great statement right there.
that
You're
is
in the
what's
right group.
needed. You need to be but do you know that people will seek out like people? So you will seek out the healthy people and clearly recognize the people who are not healthy for you, right? And so that is why we need to have more conversations like this in multiple settings
Mm-hmm.
amongst men and women, with men off by themselves, women off by themselves. But these conversations have to happen so that we are understanding that in our community, some things will not be acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
This will not be acceptable. So it's just necessary. I mean, the conversations at minimum have to continue to happen.
Yes, I think that these are conversations that need to be had as well, and learning how to heal from these situations need to be addressed as well, because we, as a people, we carry our burdens, we carry our trauma on in a knapsack, and we walk with it, and we carry it with us everywhere we go, and we never get a chance to address what we're actually going through or what we actually feeling. And it's hard for a person to even acknowledge that they're going through something like that, because they don't even have the time or the people around them to have the conversation where it can actually be recognized.
Right. Right.
And we've always have conversations and saying how black people are so used to dysfunction because that's where we're comfortable at, because that's where we come from. A lot of our relationships are dysfunctional relationships. The things that we've seen from our parents are dysfunctional. So we're thinking that it's the norm, and it's not the norm.
Yeah, it's definitely not. It's not of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not. It's not because we wouldn't be here. God
No.
knows we wouldn't have been able to do the powerful things that we've been able to do as people in multiple spaces across the
Mm-hmm.
world, across the diaspora,
Mm-hmm.
if this was of us.
Right.
Right. So when you think about it at that level, like people will sell you anything and have you believing that that's black folk stuff. That's what black folk do. They beat up on each other. Like, really? How did we survive this long if that's what we do?
Right.
Like, let's really look at that, right?
Yeah, you're right. Peaceful existence. Inside, we come from a family or era where you didn't tell your take your dirty laundry outside the house. Whatever
But
went
can I
on in
speak
the
to
house,
that? Can I
that was
please speak to that?
dysfunction.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
That is this that's dysfunctional, but it's not of us. That is not of us.
It was trained.
We would come into community and people, Sabone Funso made the wife of Maladona Somé, they wrote about the rituals that they would do amongst the Dagar people in West Africa. And it was common practice that you grieve, for example. Like you could grieve about anything. Like when people die amongst the Akan tradition in West Africa, to this day, people can grieve for a year. Right? So we have adopted this thing of, well, if your mama died Friday, she buried 2 weeks later, and you should be over it in a month.
That's not gonna happen.
Right. But look at the lie. But look at the lie that we get that is perpetuated to us when people say, "You're not over that yet," or go on and cry now because she really wouldn't want you to be sad. How you know she wouldn't want me to be sad? How you know, right? But I think that is in the same vein as what we have perpetuated amongst ourselves. That is a lie. That when things happen in our household, it should stay in the household. That is how sickness becomes pervasive, because don't nobody know you sick.
It's a false coping mechanism.
And it is a lie. We would be able to sit in community and talk about what is happening in our homes, not for the sake of putting your dirty laundry out there, but for the sake of your healing. Your healing happened in community, not off in the corner by yourself.
Right.
Because how is that helpful? How does that help your children see, oh, when things happen, we can go get help. I can go ask somebody to help me. I ain't got to deal with it by myself. So now we're generations of people walking around thinking, oh, I got to live in isolation. I can't go tell people about what, because they ain't gonna believe me, or they're gonna talk about me. What the hell? So that is something that has been given to us, but that is not of us.
Right.
That whole you keep stuff in your household and you don't share it with, because they probably already know one for first. They heard it. They heard the screams. They hear the stuff. They see the bruises when it gets to that degree. You know what I'm saying? So we have to stop holding on to these things that are not true and are not of us. That ain't of us.
How do we attack, not say attack, but how do we combat the strong, reluctant one who doesn't want to hear to the wisdom of true advice, or no matter what you say, I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. This is my house. Nobody can tell me how to run my house, blah, blah, blah. Before it gets to a point of, now I regret, because now I can't change what I just done, because the damage is done on a permanent base.
Right.
How do we as people address one like that, whether it be male or female, to the most, still just talk till we can try to break through somehow?
That's a part of it, but I will say, when it's gone far enough, there's nothing that we can do. Right. And so it is on the person to do something different. Like, if you've ever, and it sounds like we've all, myself included, have been around people who've been in domestic violence situations. And the thing is that you can say all you want to, you should leave them. You should leave them. You should leave them. You should really leave them. And they're like, but no, we good. I got these kids, or they take care of me, or she's really good to me. Like, why would I leave her? It is about being able to know that your presence is enough, but sometimes it is not enough to protect that person. Right? So you make sure that you talk to the people who are close to you, and the person who's not willing to listen, like, do not not try to intervene to the point that you are compromising yourself. Because there is even for me as a therapist, I very rarely will tell somebody, oh, you need to leave a situation. I don't care how god awful it is. But I'm gonna point out all the things that you're saying is happening that I want you to question whether or not it's healthy for you. So if you say, oh, they do this, I'm gonna say, oh, you realize that they do that? So sometimes it's not about saying you should leave. It is about, is this what you want for yourself?
Right. A lot of times, like years ago, in a time period far away, individuals will have that one relative that will put hands and feet on anything moving if their family were disrespected. And we need that family member in these days and times.
Right.
Because a lot of times the passive aggressive mode to address certain situations hasn't been working.
Right. And back in the day, the elders would pull you out into the community and beat you like you were their child because you were their child.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, you know, I have come a long way with my own anger. So I'm very clear about that. But we need to be in a space of constantly protecting ourselves and protecting community.
Right. And that's some of the things like
period.
We look at when it comes down to domestic violence, because we know that the individual who's abusing women or abusing children will never sit there and fight a man.
Right.
And we know this. We you know what I'm saying? We've seen this 1,000 times, that if he's jumping on a woman or he's jumping on kids, when a man roll up on him, the first thing he says, this ain't got nothing to do with you, bruh.
Right.
This ain't got nothing to do with you, bruh.
Right.
But the reality is it does have something to do with you. And I know, like, it's funny. It's not funny because I've witnessed family members go through. And I'm not saying that I'm the family member that would put hands and feet on individuals. This is a live feed, and
I will.
And I don't have no bail money as we speak, but I know someone who would, you know what I'm saying, that would definitely, if you call, is going to be there. You understand me?
Right.
And we need that because we love our family members just as much as those individuals love their family member. You know what I'm saying?
Peace resistance, yes.
Right, she putting you out there. I ain't gonna even lie. She every now and then she making it known you about that life. You about that life.
Yeah, I love you too, cuz.
But I think we need that. So I don't want you to ever think that I'm not of the belief, because I've threatened personally.
And that's even with brothers and sisters. When brothers and sisters get into relationships and what have you, if the individual doesn't know that your brother will step up and defend you, and then will allow anything to go on, then he will just walk all over them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that's something that is sad within itself. Like, there's nobody defending that process.
Right.
So
I think that there are people defending it, but I believe that type of defense is what needs to be sacred in community. Right. So we have to protect those people who are willing to protect us.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that is a lost art of protecting the people who are willing to protect us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I appreciate you, Peaceful Existence, and for putting me out there on Front Street like that.
Right. She said,
I
I
love the
am going to
blessing.
tell it. IT.
But
All of it.
it's what it is. It's the truthful manner that when you're addressing certain situations and the abuse, the line of abuse, because it's always phases to it.
Right.
It's the emotional, then it's the financial, then it's the physical, right? The assaulting and things of that nature. It's just not as the putting the hands and feet on. It's the actual mental and emotional abuse that individuals are getting beat down
Right.
from the very word go, because that's what opened the door for getting smacked around when they
Right.
feel like they controlling the narrative.
Right. And most of the time it's the emotional and psychological abuse that is what most people ignore or don't see as abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, a lot of people are existing and surviving emotional abuse within their relationships, but don't see it as such. But we have this word now, gaslighting,
Uh-huh.
which is real. It's real out in these streets. But that's a part of emotional abuse as well. So
I tell you,
yeah.
it's crazy that we did went through an hour and a half just about,
Right.
and we're coming to the end, Doc. We have to do a part two to this.
Okay.
We have to do a part two to this. I have to bring you back on if you're willing and your schedule fits and permits that we
Right.
can do a part two. And we would like to bring you back on. And I want to thank you for coming on. And see.
Yeah, she calls in trouble. Trouble. I love it. That what happens when you tell family you doing stuff like this. Trust me, I got caught up a few times myself. Like, I know her. Tell it, cuz. Yeah.
And I want to say thank you, you know what I'm saying, for my family support. You know what I'm saying, Akiva, my cousin, my sister, everybody who supports us and it's been supporting us today during this episode of dealing with domestic violence, sexual assault, and how to heal. So thank you also, Miss Dr. Troupe. And if you could lag back for like 5 minutes after the show so we can work out how we can get you back on for a second show would be great. Hey, KYs.
Yes, sir.
You know it's about that time, bro.
Yeah. First of all, once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, to everybody under the sound of my voice that has been tuned in and the comments has been coming. We love you all. Thank you, Dr. Harris. You're always a blessing. We're looking forward to getting you back on the show as well because it was dynamic. So, Dr. Troupe, we just want to let you know you are home. We always tell people say you have a home away from home. No, you home. You are home right here. Any given point in time, as Josh Mel said, when we can schedule you back in, you just holler and the doors is open. We will make that happen without a doubt. And to everybody that has listened, please make sure you pass this information on and sit and talk to every and anyone that you can who you love and what you see going on, because this violence is real. The talk is real. And this is why we have the Real2reel360 show. So I'm going to close it out because I was already caught up in the emotions and I'm going to have to bring it back down. I have to rise above myself and bring me back to the level what I am. So without further ado, I say peace and love to each and every one. Peace to Allah's 5% nation, the gods and earth, to all the human families on the planet Earth. This is DJ K Wise of the Real2reel360 show, along with my brother in God, my co-host with the most, my baby brother, Baby Suge. I love you to death.
So they keep it coming. I love it.
All right, everybody, listen, this has been a pleasure. Dr. Troupe, thank you again, and we will see you in a short few minutes.
Wow.